good stuff. There you go.
Yeah, well,
Welcome
I don't
back.
know how you're going to edit everything together. No, I just want to tell you like what happens. The power went out, and so people don't think I'm like some raving, lunatic. I mean, well, everybody's got their opinion about things, and you have to go with what you feel. At the end of the day, you can't be. I tell people you don't believe what John Paul Rice says because John Paul Rice said it.
Mhm.
I see that a lot of times, like online, about, well, so and so said this. I'm just bringing the light down a little bit. So and so said this. So and so said that. It's like, but if you go out and research it for yourself to the degree that you wish to, well, then you can say, hey, I looked at a couple of things and I saw some stuff, and I just didn't really see what this guy saw. Okay, cool. Fine. I went into this thing unaware. I wasn't seeking it. I mean, unconsciously, maybe because it related to my child issues, that was, I can tell you the last 4 years, a lot of trauma that's come up in me. And, but when I say that I've healed it, I don't mean that I'm like a healed man and I'm, all new. I was always this guy that you see, but I was far more negative, and it wore on my face. If you look at my pictures from 4 or 5 years ago to now, it's really like people are like, you look 10 years younger, even though I'm older. And that's even with all of like the stresses that I've had. I've actually seen what I could look like. I've been in hyper awakened state where I was there with my business partner, and he said, you're like glowing. Wow. Because what had happened is I went through a really intense, I didn't know it at the time, but I went through a really intense meditation 2 years ago that I did on my own. But I guess I must have primed my brain a certain way, and I had worked out, and then I went, sat down and meditated. This is all within a period of like 2.5 hours. And I shed so much trauma in that one meditation. It was a Joe Dispenza one, Blessing of the Energy Centers, 40 minutes. I think I cried through 30 of it. But what happened during that was I could feel my trauma leaving my body. I felt I was on my way to a better place. I sensed that I was shedding years of things that have been held in for so very long. Because why? It wasn't that I was crying. My heart and all of my body began to come alive in a way that I had never experienced before by itself, not by my doing. The blood began to flow. My organs opened up. My pressures in my body were like gone. Like I could feel like I felt relaxed throughout all my body, like in real ways, not, tightness and stuff. And it was the first time I'd felt that. And then tears, while it came up from my solar plexus into my heart, my heart felt like it was blooming. It was fluttering. It was beating, not like hard, like intensely where it hurt. It was beating like strong. And I just felt loved. I truly felt loved. And then it went all the way up to my crown and all that. That was the first experience, but then there were other ones after that. And this is what I try to explain to people is like, yes, you have supernatural powers, and they appear to be supernatural because of an unnatural world that surrounds you. And this is where, because a lot of people try to get into mystical, and it's very vague as to what they mean. When you say spiritual, that's subjective to the individual. You can't teach spirituality at an intellectual thought form and go, oh, okay, I get it. No, you gotta. But this is the cool part about it. This is why this is what I think Jesus embodied. Each one of us is having our own unique and individual moment to moment lived experience in simultaneous realities, co-creating with each other. Now there's social norms, cultural norms, laws, agreements. I mean, there's complex structures and all, you know, throughout time going on to create this mix. But what it taught me was the compassion for what I didn't know and what others didn't know around me. Because I realized that when you see yourself as a child of God, you see everyone this way.
Yep.
And you realize that God loves each and every one of his children equally, in the sense of course, you can come at it from the angle of an authoritarian where, you know, God has wrath and this. Look, I don't believe in a schizophrenic God. I believe in a God that actually has always loved us, wants what is best for us. That's what you're born as when you're a child. There's other reasons, you can make sense of other reasons for unconscious doings onto you as a child, which is why that is. Some people believe you come here for that. I don't like to get into those rationalizations because at the end of the day, I cannot articulate to you my entire lived experience in words. Nor could I even contemplate and begin to tell you among 7.9 billion people on this planet, for which many are dying at this very second through horrific tragedy, as we're talking, that God has a plan and that you should understand that and make sense of that in your own way, distant from the emotional traumas that you would feel about losing someone very important to you. You see what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense to people. You can't sit there and talk on a higher level when somebody's grieving. Yeah. Really? So to me, it's like this. We're all children seeking love from the beginning, manifesting the light before all the troubles begin. And we still manifest the light when all the troubles are going on, even when we're doing the sin, even when we're doing the acts, even when we're doing things that we know are wrong. We're still manifesting that light. We're dimming it, but we're manifesting it. So when someone, like, you know, doesn't understand this or doesn't get that, I used to get mad at them. And I had to see my anger play out in another person with someone who was ignorant. And despite all of the information I had been feeding her, despite all of this, I've seen this over and over now. So I had a good friend of mine who'd known me for 10 years. We just stopped talking last year. Now, it didn't escalate into something terrible, but it just got to a point where I was so mad and so angry at her because she was extremely college educated, talented, very compassionate person. She went in to get into social work because she wanted to save kids. After learning about the horrors of human trafficking, she said, well, I have to do something about this. I want to affect a child's life. Where can I go? That's right in front of me. I can help these kids. And she did. She did. That is a verifiable fact. This was not somebody that was not caring about her. She had her own problems, of course, in her own life, like all of us do, but she was dedicated to being there with that little girl or that little boy while the caseworkers were trying to sort out the horrors of the parents. She chose to go into that, leave academia. Big deal. But there was only a certain level that she could come to a certain understanding of things and didn't see the cognitive dissonance within her that was a reflection of her own life, for which, and it's not a judgment against her, because again, I'm 43, I'm not married, so I'm not criticizing anybody, and I have my reasons why I'm not, and they're not me in justification of the institution of marriage. It's like, no, I had a lot of fucked up shit, and I picked a lot of bad people in my life. I did. We all pick bad people sometimes, but I picked a lot of them consistently for years. So, but before that was my mother, and she was mentally ill. So I'm not just saying that's the only reason why, but point being is that this lady was not married. She's older than me. And I remember in some of our conversations, she said, I see people in love and I just don't see how easy it is for them.
Wow.
And what I realized in my own journey through this is that we cause that. We do that to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We unconsciously usually do. I mean, very few people consciously want to be a victim unless you're a narcissist or have some certain position of power or virtue that you can get in. I mean, there are people that do that, don't get me wrong, but most people don't operate in that space of victimhood. So I realized that this is a sabotage that we do because we don't want to face the pain of the reality of facing and confronting the emotional reality of our childhoods. That's number one, because the present day is a reflection of that. Mm. And I went through my own thing. I can only speak to this because I've read it in books and now I have lived it. I've read it in Alice Miller and I have lived it, and there is no way out. When we talk about intelligence, like, you know, somebody might say I'm crazy and another person say, my God, this guy's a genius and he can just hold all this information in his head and talk. Yes, I mean, there's merit to that, but there was a reason why it was created. I had to survive as a child, you know, and I had multiple lies on top of me and in me. So what I have been able to do in this process, which, you know, is, I say it's a gift from God because I wouldn't want to be where I was 4 years ago now. I think I'd be in a really ugly, toxic place. Yeah. For sure. I know that for sure. Just my being would be very bitter and starting to get very resentful. Mm-hmm. So when I look at those things and I realize that I had to go through and examine all of the things that I held on to, both in the present reality and how they were actually unconsciously tied to the past. That I was imitating and repeating that behavior over and over again, not the events, the behaviors that I was taught in order for my survival. And so I had to be ready for my mother, who had multiple personalities. So my attention as a child was on her, having to disassociate and be aware to protect myself simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And so it created all these pathways, but of course they were created by force and terror, not by love and curiosity, wonder, all the things that you're born with. So I had like counter programming, which was rooted in survival. And when I started to look at the statistics of everything that what I had endured as a child and what I had experienced as a child, just the symptoms of everything, just verifiable facts, statistically, I should be dead long ago. And or at minimum, if I was still alive today under the circumstances from which I grew up, and I would be a drug addict, a prostitute, and possibly would have killed somebody, or somebody would have killed me along the way. Not consciously, but out of self-defense. Because I was never a monster in the way that I wanted to hurt innocent people. Mm-hmm. But when I looked and learned about my dad's childhood and my mom's childhood, and I realized that what I came here to do, at least in my conscious choice in this life, mm-hmm. is that I did the work that they could not accomplish. It brought me back. I mean, I tell people this story. I'm not going to go into all the details. It just doesn't feel like right for this conversation. But these last 4 years, and really the last 2, when I say I relaxed into God, I questioned everything. Mm-hmm. And I trusted in what I did not know. Mm-hmm. And that was the hardest thing for me as a child who's been abused. Mm-hmm. First of all, talking to me about submitting to God's authority, and I'd just pull up a middle finger right away and tell you to F off back then, because to me, authority and submission are not words that are very pleasant in my experience. So I had to find it through going into the darkness of the world and coming back to myself and having a better understanding of those forces and how they govern the world and my body. And then I had to know the truth about both what they believe, and then that is when I found my way back to God and Jesus, because these people, I'd be very, very serious about that. They are dedicated to what they are doing like a religion that they live every day. So every day they go to church. The world is for them to control and dominate and dictate where things go.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tell people, I said, do not underestimate the forces that you are dealing with and think that because you have them cornered by pedophilia that you've got them. You are not going to defeat them by force. You're going to have to become a force outside of their world and bring other people into your space that you have lived with the knowledge that you have gained about the world that is different from the one that is offered to everyone else. That's why you must go within, because until you do that, all you will be able to do at best is make arguments against a broken system for which there is no answer. So even if you're able to make the valid point about it, until you've created the new space, they have no way to go. And let me just say, all of the pre-existing programming, until they've decided to divorce themselves, which is a conscious and emotional choice, usually arise by emotion in an event. But until that time, they're going to keep getting pulled back in through the unconscious behaviors that are being evoked in them, that have been with them since childhood, that have felt as normal as they did back then. So this is the thing that I'm kind of going all over, but I want people to understand that this God essence that is with us and in us and born within us has infinite powers and abilities of upgrades, both emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, as well as physically.